I used to think family planning was just that. Spreadsheets, doctor referrals, a calendar that looks like a military op with hearts drawn around the days you're supposed to be romantic on command. I didn't factor in how much faith is baked into the process. You trust a handful of people in white coats with your future. You trust the person you love with their private panic. You sign a stack of forms with your name and don't imagine anyone else would ever put it where it doesn't belong. I'm Noah, 34. I run vendor ops for a hospital system in Denver, which means my life is a mix of contracts, compliance, and an unholy number of per my last email messages. My wife, Hannah, is 31, a senior account manager at a brand studio that makes dentists look like lifestyle gurus. She calls herself Vibes with a Spreadsheet. I call her the person who convinced me to buy linen napkins for the first time in my life. We married fast on purpose. Neither of us wanted a 2-year engagement sponsored by Pinterest. City Hall in a navy suit I already owned, and her in a white pantsuit that looked like a decision. Faux, afterward. A week later, we were looking at starter homes, and 3 months after that, we closed on a 2-bed in Park Hill with a crabapple tree that drops confetti on the lawn like it's celebrating itself. Kids were always a when, not an if. We were basic about it in the sweetest way. Summers at the lake, Halloween costumes that require hot glue, dad with a wagon. We started trying the normal way, and I learned that nothing makes sex feel like a math problem faster than a thermometer on the nightstand and an app that buzzes at 5:38 a.m. with a cheery, fertile window. 6 months in, Hannah said we should get checked, just to know. She said it lightly, like a woman suggesting you rotate your tires. Her OB ordered day 3 labs for her and an analysis for me. She made a joke about go do your science, kissed my cheek, and handed me a plastic cup wrapped in a brown paper bag like a junior high contraband exchange. The report came back and introduced 3 new words to our marriage: count, motility, morphology. The numbers next to them did what numbers do. They took the air out of the room without raising their voice. My count was fine. Motility was low. Morphology was the one that made the urologist frown like a disappointed piano teacher. We see this a lot, he said, kind. You're not broken. It does mean getting pregnant might take longer. Or we could skip the frustration and go straight to help. The word infertile wasn't stamped on my forehead in red, but I felt it anyway. There's a specific shame reserved for men who can unclog sinks, assemble furniture without instructions, negotiate vendor discounts for a living, and still fail at the most caveman job description on Earth. Hannah was brilliant about it. "We're a team," she said, tucking her feet under my thigh on the couch like she always does when we watch something trashy. "If your swimmers are lazy, we'll put them in an Uber." The fertility clinic felt like an Apple store for sad hope. White everything. Mint tea. The staff had this particular brand of empathy that lands just right, warm without pity. Our reproductive endocrinologist, Dr. Lee, drew diagrams like a coach and explained ICSI like a magic trick. We pick the best-looking sperm and inject it directly into the egg. She said it with a smile that made me want to pay her mortgage. Then came the consent packet. It was a book, pages on pages of what if. What if you split? What if one of you dies? What if there are extra embryos? What if we have to use donor sperm as a backup? That last part made me blink. "We won't need that," I said too quickly. Dr. Lee looked at me in that physician way that makes you feel seen and not judged. "It's a contingency box," she said. "Most patients never check it. We're just covering scenarios." Hannah squeezed my hand under the table. "Later, at home," she said, "maybe we do check it. It doesn't mean we will use it. It just means if everything went sideways on retrieval day, we wouldn't waste the cycle." She said it with a gentleness that I mistook for prudence. She also said, "We'd match to you hair, eyes, all of it. You wouldn't even notice." She laughed and then winced. That sounded monstrous. I'm saying, practically, if you're the guy, you're the guy. I signed the page without reading it twice because the person I loved told me it was a safety net and because men who hate admitting fear will call anything practical if it hides the truth. Stims turned our kitchen into a pharmacy. Hannah did her injections like a champ, laughing at the bruises blooming on her belly like abstract art. I did the thing husbands do: timers, snacks, playlists that pretend to be energy. On retrieval day, they got 12 eggs, which the nurses called a nice haul, like we'd been fishing. I went into the room with the old magazines and the bad chair and did my part. We got 6 fertilized embryos out of the batch. 2 made it to blast. We froze 1. We put 1 back. Dr. Lee hugged us and said, "You did everything right. Now we see if the universe says yes." 2 weeks later, a blood test said yes. I've never cried as hard as I cried in the car in the lab parking lot holding Hannah's hand while she laughed and cried and hiccuped. We did it, until the sound turned into a song. We bought cinnamon rolls, took the longest nap of our marriage, and woke up to texts from friends we hadn't told. Hannah had set a calendar notification to send them all the photo that just said, "Say something funny at 4 p.m. It was very her. It was very her. Pregnancy was fine and also not. Morning sickness was all day. She had cravings that made our Instacart shopper text, "You okay?" We argued once about names and then decided not to tell anyone until we knew him or her. We found out at the 20-week scan by accident when the text said he's shy and then apologized like she'd spoiled a movie. We threw a small backyard thing with cheap beer and a blue cupcake because a part of me still loves stupid traditions. Miles arrived on a gray Tuesday in March after a long night that felt like a storm deciding whether to commit. He was 8 pounds of stunned. He had Hannah's mouth and a cowlick that matched the one I see in my barber's mirror every 3 weeks. People tell you the first time you hold your child, it changes your blood. They do not tell you how particular the smell is. Warm milk, plastic, something like baked bread. I fell in love with the top of my son's head. Newborn life did what it does. Days bled. Nights clumped. I made peace with decaf. I learned how to do almost everything one-handed. Hannah slid into a version of herself that looked like a montage and felt like a grind. She breastfed, she pumped, she cried on the laundry room floor twice and then yelled at me for watching. I learned not to narrate her struggle back to her. I just picked up more. There were comments. Of course there were. My mother, who loves me more than is good for me, said over FaceTime, "He has your eyes." And then, 2 weeks later, he has Hannah's eyes. And then, at 8 weeks, whoever's eyes they are, they're big. Hannah rolled hers and told me not to let women who call every baby peanut colonize my brain. If there were moments that didn't fit, I filed them under "Kids are weird." I have brown eyes. Hannah has hazel that lean green in sun. Miles's eyes, for months, shifted slate to blue to gray green. He tanned in summer like me. He hated sweet potatoes like me. He had a mole on his shoulder like Hannah's grandmother. The thing about babies is you can find anyone in them if you need to. 3 months in, we did something I never thought we'd do because the internet pushed its way into our house and whispered paranoia with a smile. Hannah's sister made a joke. Bad one about the donor at a barbecue after 3 margs. She didn't mean anything by it. It landed anyway. That night, Hannah suggested we get a paternity test to shut everyone up. She said it like a woman who has spent a decade in client service and knows stakeholders are monsters. Do we really need to? I asked, because the idea of swabbing my son's cheek to prove what my bones already knew felt grotesque. It'll be funny, she said. We'll frame it and send a copy to my sister with a bow. She had a lab in mind already. Quick turnaround. Cheek swab kit by mail. She said a friend from college, Kara, worked there and could expedite. Perk of knowing people behind the curtain, she joked, and I kissed her because I like when she feels powerful. We swabbed Miles's soft inner cheek while he looked at us like we were the strangest toys. I swabbed myself. Hannah took the envelopes to mail. 4 days later, she texted me a screenshot from work with a dancing emoji, 99.98% probability of paternity. I exhaled in a way I didn't realize I'd been holding. We put the paper in a folder and joked about making it a Christmas ornament. Kara came to dinner once that fall. She wore scrubs and an elastic headband and had that harried, caffeinated lab rat energy I recognize from supply chain meetings that go too long. They talked shop about pipettes in a way that made me wonder what parts of our friends' lives we never see. Kara liked Miles. He liked her hair. She brought a little stuffed giraffe from the hospital gift shop and a bottle of Cava because your husband looks like a man who needs bubbles. She was right. Never trust the bubbles. Time did its thing. Miles turned 1 and learned the word dog and applied it to everything living that wasn't us. We met the other parents at the park who say gentle 12 times in a row and then laugh when their kid body slams someone. Hannah went back to work and made a campaign for a snack company that made gut health sound like a party you want to RSVP to. I kept my head down at the hospital and started volunteering on Saturdays with a mentorship program because there is only so much procurement a soul can digest. 2 big things happened the year Miles turned 2. First, my Uncle Walt died. Second, we learned we were rich on paper in a way that made me want to put all the paper in the freezer. Uncle Walt was my dad's older brother, a Vietnam vet whose sense of humor never recovered from 1969 and who refused to Instagram his breakfast on principle. He'd lived on family land outside Fort Collins his whole life, never married, no kids, retired from the city utilities department, and spent 20 years fixing the world for his neighbors for free. He liked me because I didn't talk much at Thanksgiving unless I had something to say, and because when I was 18 he taught me how to replace a toilet flange without swearing. He told my dad 100 times that the land goes to the line. He meant blood. He meant family. He also meant he had opinions about what family means that fossilized sometime around Reagan. I loved him anyway. We found out about the will after the funeral, the way people do in movies. Walt's lawyer, a man who looked like he'd been born wearing a tie, called my dad and me to the office. "I need you and any of your direct issue," he said, which made me ask if I was a spreadsheet. He said it with that particular legal dryness that manages to insult and inform in one go. The office was straight out of a TV show. Dark wood, framed diplomas, a ficus that has seen secrets. The will was simple, almost mean. Walt left some cash to the VA hospital, a pickup to a buddy, and the house and land to the eldest surviving nephew, whose blood is mine and his line. That meant me. It also meant the lawyer cleared his throat and said a sentence I was not ready to hear. There's a bloodline clause. The trust that comes with the land sets aside a fund for the education and care of your children, but it requires proof of paternity from you to any beneficiary. Hannah made a face. "You're kidding," she said, and then laughed to soften it. "That's medieval." "I didn't draft his politics," the lawyer said. "Just his paperwork. In plain terms, for your son to be in the trust, there needs to be a DNA test indicating he's Mr. Myers's biological child. It's a one-time thing. We use a chain of custody lab. We keep it sealed after. I know it's intrusive. The clause is iron." I felt 2 things at once: offense, because my son is my son, and relief, because we'd done this already. "We did a paternity test when he was 3 months," I said. "We have the paperwork." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Unfortunately, the trust has specific requirements about chain of custody. Home tests don't count. We have to schedule you and the child through a partner lab. It's a formality." Hannah recovered her smile for the room. "Of course," she said. "We'll do whatever weird thing the dead man requires to give our living boy a college fund." In the car, her smile fell off like a mask with a loose elastic. "This is disgusting," she said. "Walt loved you. He loved me. He loved Miles. Now we have to bring our baby to a lab like he's a criminal because your uncle wrote a clause for 1840. I know, I said. I don't love it either. I squeezed her hand. It's a hoop. We jump through it. We get a ranch we didn't earn and a fund we'll never need, and we roll our eyes at dead uncles privately like decent people. She didn't squeeze back. She stared at the windshield like the road had done something to her. Do we have to tell your parents? She asked, small. About the test? I said. I guess they'll find out when Walt's lawyer sends the "here's what the old man wanted" letter. Or we just tell them we're doing paperwork and leave it there. We don't have to narrate everything for my mother. She'll make it a hobby. Hannah looked relieved, and then guilty, and then weirdly angry. I hate this, she said again, quieter. I hate that a piece of paper gets to tell me who my son is. At home that night, we were tender with each other in the way couples are when the world makes them weird. I bathed Miles, and he threw water on me with such joy it was almost theological. Hannah made lasagna and put too much cheese and then apologized for it like she'd committed a misdemeanor. We watched a show and pretended not to check our email. The next morning, the lawyer's assistant sent a calendar invite for the lab appointment. Chain of custody, cheek swabs, 30 minutes, bring ID. She used nice words for an ugly thing. We accepted. I slept badly for a few days, which I chalked up to the idea of taking my 2-year-old to a room with vinyl chairs and fluorescent lights and handing a stranger a Q-tip like it's a sacrament. Hannah didn't sleep either. I could tell. She lay awake on her side like a statue of a woman who doesn't want to be touched. When I reached for her, she reached back, out of muscle memory, not desire. On the third night, she went to the couch at 2 a.m. and texted me from the other room. Sorry, I'm a monster. This whole thing is gross. You know when a musician goes just slightly out of tune and you can't figure out if it's your ears or the room? That was our house. Nothing was wrong exactly. Everything was uneasy. The appointment day came and looked so much like a normal morning, it made me mad. Miles wanted the green cup, not the blue. Lids were betrayal. Our dog, Daisy, barked at the mail like it was a concept she objected to. Hannah picked a shirt that made Miles's eyes look more green because she thinks ahead for photos even when she's crying on the inside. The lab was in a medical building in Cherry Creek. I've been in 100 times for procurement meetings, which felt like an extra insult. I know the smell of the lobby. I know the elevator that takes a beat before it agrees to go. The waiting room had 3 chairs and a table with old people magazines. The phlebotomist behind the glass had the smile of a person who has seen everything that can go wrong with families and still believes in getting to lunch on time. 2 swabs, she said. Dad and child. IDs. You can sit together. Miles was brave about it, even thought it tickled, and he hated being told to say "ah" by anyone not named us. He did it because I did it first. He looked at me, I opened my mouth, he opened his. And if you're reading this thinking, did your heart drop? No, it didn't. It was annoying, and it was sad, and it was fine. On the way out, I promised him a donut for being brave, and he said sprinkles, like a prayer. We stopped at the coffee shop around the corner. Hannah ordered a latte with oat milk and looked like a woman pretending to be in a routine. I took a photo of Miles with frosting on his nose and texted it to my dad with paperwork complete. He sent back a thumbs up and a bring those cheeks by later, which both parties knew meant donut cheeks and not swab cheeks because we are a family with boundaries. At home, Hannah said she needed to jump on a call, the kind of language that means, I'd like to be alone. I took Miles to the park. We did the slide 14 times. I watched other parents do the same dance and wondered how many of us were carrying a secret envelope. The results were supposed to take a week. They came in 2 days because money moves paper faster, which I hate and participate in for a living. Walt's lawyer called and asked if we could come in to finalize the trust paperwork. He sounded like a man asking you to sign for a package. I said yes. Hannah said, Do we have to both go? And when I looked at her like she'd grown a second head, she covered with, no, of course we do. I'm just, feedback is scary. On the drive to the lawyer's office, Hannah was quiet in a way that didn't feel like thinking. It felt like bracing. She held her phone the way you hold a glass of water when you've just heard a crash in the next room. Twice, she started a sentence and then switched it to, never mind. I reached over, put my hand on her knee, and she flinched, not in pain, not like I'd startled her, like touch was a question she didn't have time to answer. In the elevator, she pressed the button too hard. In the hallway, she smoothed her shirt 3 times like the fabric was misbehaving. In the room, she sat slightly turned away from the table like there was a draft. The lawyer smiled kindly and did the ritual language about, thank you for your patience, and we'll keep this brief, and your uncle was a character. Then he opened a folder with the kind of care you use on Christmas morning when you know the present is either a sweater or a grenade. Before he could speak, Hannah said, too bright. It's fine, right? It's just a checkbox? She squeezed my hand under the table so hard it felt like a warning. The lawyer looked at me, then at her, then at the paper. He cleared his throat in a way that made the ficus look interested. He said my name. He said the words, I'm sorry. He said the laboratory indicates a non-match. The room changed shape. Not dramatically, not like in the movies where the sound goes out and you float to the ceiling, more like a hotel heater kicked on, and you realized you'd been cold, and now the air was wrong in a new way. My first thought, and I hate this because it makes me sound like a fool, was not Hannah. It was the lab. That can't be right, I said, calm. We did a test when he was a baby. It said 99 point whatever. The lawyer folded his hands like a man containing his own discomfort. Chain of custody labs rarely make errors, he said. We can retest if it will help you feel confident. It won't change the trust requirement. He hesitated. I understand this is... He didn't finish because the door opened and his assistant stuck her head in with a whisper and an apologetic face about some other thing that wasn't our life exploding. Hannah was breathing like she had just run stairs carrying a box. She stared at the corner of the table as if she had misplaced a thought there. I turned to her and saw, not guilt exactly, not fear. Something like a calculation sprinting without shoes. Babe, she said, and her voice did a thing I recognized from every time she's had to sell a client on a bad idea. We used a donor. I had the thought you have when you hit black ice, and for a second your brain tells you you're still in control. We did ICSE, I said, because facts are a raft. She shook her head the tiniest degree. We checked the donor box, she said softly, to me but with eyes on the lawyer like maybe the room could absolve us. It was a backup. Dr. Lee said my eggs weren't liking your morphology and, well, on the day of, it was. She flicked her hand like she had lost a word for chaos, and they had to use the backup so we didn't waste the cycle. I sat perfectly still so no one would see the floor tilt. They would have told me, I said. My voice came from far away and sounded polite. I was there. I signed. They would have told me. They left me a message, she said. I was on meds. You were at Starbucks. I made the call. I had to. We agreed in the packet. We checked the box. It was you or it was no baby. I chose us. We were in a lawyer's office with a dead man's will on the table, and I was arguing about a voicemail from 2 years ago. It felt like the stupidest version of my life. The lawyer cleared his throat into the shape of an exit. I'll give you privacy, he said, and left the folder and left the room and left us with a ficus that should really qualify for continuing education credits. I looked at Hannah and saw the person I love and the person who had just arranged words to make me feel like the villain if I didn't agree I was still the hero. I'm his dad, I said, because the truth has to be spoken slowly when the room is trying to sell you a cheaper version. I am his dad. I know, she said, grabbing my hand with both of hers hard enough to hurt. And this is just paper. Your uncle's paper. It doesn't mean anything about us. It doesn't change who you are, who he is. Behind her words, I heard a new sentence, a quiet one. We are going to survive this if you agree. This is a clerical error on God's part. Who is the donor? I asked, though I already knew the answer I did not want. I saw it in the way her jaw tensed. I saw it in the way she didn't blink. It doesn't matter, she said quickly. Anonymous. A match. Blue eyes, 6 feet, college degree. We picked him because he looked like you if the universe had given you easier sperm. I swear I did this for us. Who? I repeated, and the word sounded like a hammer set gently on the table. Her mouth opened, closed. The pause was a confession all by itself. We can talk about it at home, she whispered. Please, not here. Not with a trust breathing down our necks. I looked at the manila folder, at the crisp signature of a lab director I would soon meet, at my name typed next to the word non-match, at the ink that dared me to stand up and keep breathing. Okay, I said. We go home. We talk. On the ride back, I drove like a person who had taken the door off a house and needed to hold it on with one hand. Hannah stared out the window and scrolled her phone in a way that made me think of a person looking for a lifeguard. Miles was at daycare making play. Dough snakes and calling them noodles. The sky was the exact color of a stalled apology. At the house, Hannah put her laptop on the counter like a shield. Before you go nuclear, she said, quiet but with iron, I need you to remember what we've built. Your name is on the birth certificate. You cut the cord. You did midnight bottles. Everything that matters is true. This is an old man's clause and a lab's opinion. Opinion, I repeated, hearing myself laugh and hating the sound. Hannah, DNA isn't Yelp. She closed her eyes. Open them. I was afraid, she said finally. The first honest thing since the elevator. I didn't want to lose the cycle. I didn't want to tell you because, I don't know. I didn't want you to hate me while I was pregnant. So you decided for me, I said. I decided for us, she said. And if you'd gotten what you wanted, the first try the normal way, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. I put my hands on the back of a chair so I could feel wood and not throw anything. It wasn't anonymous, I said, very calm. Was it? She stared at the microwave clock like it could count down to a different life. We picked a donor that felt safe, she said. The words were precise and slippery, an ad agency pitch for a lie. Someone I know, someone with good genes. Our son, I said. You gave my son someone you know for a father and called it safety. She swallowed. When she spoke, the word was a knife handed to me handle. First, Derek. Of course it was. Derek, the ex from college who ran half the marathon circuit of the Front Range and the other half of every conversation he ever entered. Derek, who messaged her after our wedding. Congrats, you look insanely happy. And then, a year later, thinking of you, when she posted about a rough day. Derek, whose name she had always said with that particular mix of mockery and nostalgia women use for a thing they know is bad for them, and also miss for reasons they don't surface. He was a donor at a clinic in Boulder, she said. Rush now, wanting me to have the facts so I could hate her for the right reasons. Before us. He did it for money in grad school, like 1,000 guys. When Dr. Lee said morphology looked rough, I panicked. I called. He agreed to be a directed donor. It was easy. Kara helped with the paperwork. It was all above board. If this were any other day but today, if your uncle hadn't decided to be king of the bloodline, none of this would matter. We have what we wanted. Kara, I said, the name sticking like a stone in my mouth. Your friend from the lab. Hannah blinked. She works at a different facility, she said quickly. She just knew how to expedite. Don't make that into something it isn't. And there it was, sitting between us like a loaded form. I had a home paternity test screenshot from a different lab saying 99.98% mine because a friend expedited. I had a chain of custody test saying not mine because Walt's ghost demanded it. I had a wife whose talent is narrative telling me one story is an anomaly and the other is bureaucracy. I had a name, Derek, that made the room tilt. "Sit with me," she said, softer now, the voice she uses when she wants the world to come back into a shape she can sell. "Please, let's decide what to do. We can retest. We can talk to Dr. Lee. We can talk to a lawyer about the trust. We can figure out how to control this. But please do not let a dead man tell our son who his dad is." I sat because the alternative was leaving, and I was not ready to decide whether leaving is something you do, like paying a bill, or like jumping off a cliff. The chair made the same tiny complaint it always makes. Daisy put her chin on my knee like a therapist with fur. "Okay," I said again, even though nothing was okay. "We'll retest, and we'll go see Dr. Lee, and we'll ask Kara to explain the home test." Hannah flinched at that last name like it was a bright light. "Don't make this into a trial," she said, not begging, warning. "We are good. We are a family. If you start calling people, you will make it a thing it doesn't have to be." "It is a thing," I said. "You made a person with me and with someone else and told yourself only one of those counts." She put her head in her hands, and for a second I thought she would sob. She didn't. She sat very still, like a child waiting out a teacher's anger. Miles woke up from his nap then and called for me in the small voice that knows my shape. I went down the hall and picked up my son and held him like an anchor. He put his hands on my cheeks and said, "Dada," like a period at the end of a sentence. I swallowed a truth that had more corners than I was built for. In my phone, I opened the folder with the baby paternity test screenshot and the email from Walt's lawyer and the calendar invite for the retest and the contact card for Dr. Lee, and, because I am who I am, a new note titled Questions. At the top, I wrote, "What exactly did I sign? Who authorized donor used that day? What is Kara's job? Where did the home result come from? Why did the chain of custody lab take 2 days?" The last line read, "What is the truth I can live with and not hate myself for later?" That night, after Miles was asleep and Denver's particular hush settled, the one that arrives like a jacket, Hannah sat next to me on the couch and handed me her phone. "Here," she said, "everything with Derek. You can look. Nothing romantic, just logistics. I'm not hiding anything." The thread was what she said, dates and clinic names and thank you. And this is weird, but I'm grateful. And one photo of a coffee cup on a hospital cafeteria tray that made my heart do a bad trick because I recognized the laminate. No hearts. No late night confessions. No thinking of you. That would have killed me on impact. Just enough to destroy the version of the story where I was the only man whose body had anything to do with my son. I put her phone down and stood up because sitting felt like a lie. "We'll retest," I said, finalizing a plan that didn't need my voice. "And we'll meet with Dr. Lee, and we'll talk to Walt's lawyer about the trust. And after that, we figure us out. And Miles," she said quickly, desperate. "Correct. We figure out how to keep him away from this. He's 2. He doesn't need any of this." "He needs parents who don't make him into paper," I said. "I didn't," she whispered. And for the first time all day, I believed she believed that. That she had conjured a reality where love and intention outvoted biology and paperwork. Where the end justified the means and the means were something you did for the team. Where calling a lab friend for a favor wasn't a lie, it was just smart. We slept inches apart that night, ocean quiet between us. I dreamed of the ranch I'd never asked for, and a dead man explaining blood to me, while my son wiped frosting on my shirt and laughed. The next morning, I called the lad from the lawyer's letter and scheduled a second chain of custody test, because sometimes the only way through a doubt is to repeat the thing that made it loud. I emailed Dr. Lee's office and asked for our entire file consents, notes, voicemails, because if there's one thing I know from work, it's that paper tells the story, the mouth won't. I texted Kara, "Coffee? Need to pick your brain about lab protocols," and she sent back a thumbs up and a "tonight?" That landed like a dare. And somewhere in another part of the city, I imagined a man lacing up his running shoes, checking his pace, blissfully unaware that he had been invited into my house by a woman who thought safety meant picking a donor you already knew how to say goodbye to. I stood at the sink and washed 2 mugs that didn't need washing because my hands wanted a task. And Hannah came up behind me and put her forehead between my shoulder blades and said, "I love you," into my spine. I closed my eyes. "I love you," I said, because truth can be plural and still be true. Then I dried the mugs, put them in the cabinet, and started a list of everything we were about to break before we could build anything that deserved to stand. I didn't sleep the night before the second test. I lay on the couch with a blanket that smells like our dog and the hum of the fridge 2 rooms away and the feeling you get in high school the night before a state exam you didn't study for because you didn't know it was possible to fail. Chain of custody labs make a point of being boring. Different office, different phlebotomist, same fluorescent lights that flatten everyone into paperwork. They double-checked IDs. They sealed the swabs with tamper tape like valuables. I signed across a piece of transparent sticker and thought about how many times you signed to be believed. The call came 48 hours later. It wasn't a call, actually, an email that said, "Results available in your portal." There is nothing less romantic than a portal. I logged in. The same crisp language. The same gentle brutality of numbers. So much information and none of it interested in how I felt. Non-match again. I printed it because screens make lies easier. I put it in the folder with the first result, and the home test, and the will copy, and the list I'd started called questions. Then I called Dr. Lee's office and asked for the whole file. The audit log of consents, every note, every recorded call. I know how hospitals keep records. I know how to ask for the ones that live behind, the ones you're usually allowed to see. They scheduled us with Dr. Lee for 9 a.m. the next day to review your chart. The woman on the phone did kindness like triage. In bed that night, Hannah lay on her side facing the window. I reached for her and she let me put a hand on her hip like a truce. "I'm going to be honest with her," I said into the dark. "If that scares you, say it now." "She won't throw me under a bus," Hannah said, voice small. "She told me we'd do what it took. She told me contingency was a thing." "She told us both that," I said. "She didn't tell me you called an ex and signed me into a plan I didn't know I was in." Dr. Lee is good at the hard rooms. She led with an apology before I asked a single question. "I'm sorry you're sitting with this," she said. "I remember you both. You were kind to the nurses on retrieval day. It's a small thing. It matters." I went straight to it, because circling the wound wasn't going to make it pretty. "Who authorized the use of a donor on our cycle?" I asked. "And why was I not in that loop?" She slid a thin stack of papers across the table. "Your original consents," she said. "You checked donor of last resort if 0 viable sperm on day of, with the note matched to spouse phenotype. That language matters. It's only triggered if there are literally 0 sperm to work with, or in truly emergent failure of the sample. Your day of semen analysis did not meet that threshold. We proceeded with ICSI. We did not use donor on your primary cycle." I blinked. "But Miles exists, so when did donor get involved?" She kept her voice neutral, not defensive, not performative. "On day of, there was a second consent entered into your chart for directed donor backup, signed digitally under your name and your wife's. It authorized a specific donor to be used if the embryology team deemed your sample non-viable for injection. That is an uncommon path. It requires both spouses' signatures under our policy." I could see the page from here. My name, neat font, a scribble that looked like my signature if someone wrote it while running. I didn't sign that, I said. I see that, she said, and turned the page to a screen capture, the IP address that signed both fields. Not from our house, not from my phone. We are doing an internal review, she said carefully, because even if there had been a true emergency, which per the lab notes, there was not, both consents are required. The documentation indicates a directed donor was presented to us as pre-cleared. The clinic did not reach out to you because your e-signature was on file. Who presented the directed donor? I asked, though we both knew. Dr. Lee looked at Hannah, not me. Your wife, she said, and an outside coordinator named Kara M. I recognize the name because she's not employed by our clinic. Hannah folded in on herself and then straightened because performance is also a survival skill. I told Kara to help because I panicked, she said. I told her we had your permission. I told her the box was checked. She greased. I know how that sounds. I didn't think it would matter. I thought it would save us. Save us from what? I asked. A month of waiting. 2 months. A year. The truth. Dr. Lee laid out the rest like a path she'd walked before. The clinic would audit the file. Their compliance department would interview everyone whose name touched our case. If signatures were forged, that was a reportable event. She apologized again, and it was the kind that is worth money because it was attached to action. If the clinic erred, we will refund your cycle, she said. If third parties committed fraud, we will cooperate with any investigation. Then she said the line I didn't expect and will always be grateful for. We can talk about genes, she said, but in my experience as a physician, family stays together on the blood of who shows up. You have already done that. Biology has power. So does intention. Use clean paper. Don't let shame pick your pen. After, in the parking lot, the air felt thin. Hannah leaned against the car like it needed her and said, I'm sorry, for the first time without a because attached. I know, I said, and the sentence rang true, and hollow, and both. I met Kara that night at a coffee shop that stays open late because medical students need a place to pretend to have a plan. She hugged me like we were friends. We aren't. She ordered an Americano and then didn't touch it. I'm in trouble, aren't I? She said, before I asked a question. I didn't come to hurt you, I said. I need you to tell me what you did so I don't become a man I can't stand later. She nodded slowly, like her head weighed something. Hannah asked for a favor, she said. She said you were on board, that you'd checked the donor contingency, that your morphology was bad and you were spiraling. She said if the clinic called you would freak and maybe cancel and she was on meds and couldn't handle a meltdown. I know Hannah. In college, she was the only person who could get me to turn my work in on time and not fail chem. I believe women when they say their partner is fragile. I let that sit because anything I said would be uglier than the truth. I prepped the donor paperwork, she went on, voice going flatter, more clinical now that she had entered the part of the conversation where she's good at being smart. Because I used to volunteer the front desk at a different clinic. Directed donor is weird, but not unheard of. The clinic should have called you. They didn't because the e-sign said they didn't have to. That's not my lane. But then the paternity thing started up, and Hannah texted like a person watching a fuse burn, and she asked me if the home test would shut people up. I said sure. I sent a kit from a lab I consult for sometimes. You know private labs, they're not chain of custody. They're toys for anxious people. She asked if I could, quote, help the analysis find the right answer. I told her the kit wouldn't stand up in court anyway. She said she needed to sleep. I need you to say this next part in a full sentence, I said, if you did what I think you did. She stared at me in a way that made me think of a deer checking wind direction. Then she said it. I reported a probable inclusive result on your unauthorized direct-to-consumer test. I created a PDF with your name and an accession number that does not exist in the lab information system because we never accessioned it. I did it from my kitchen because I am a coward who told myself I was keeping a family together. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. Being calm when a room offers you the truth is the only way you earn more of it. Thank you for telling me, I said. She waited for the next piece like pain at a doctor's appointment. Are you going to ruin me? She asked. I could say I was coerced. I could say I thought it was a prank. I could say I was drunk. Her mouth twisted in something like a laugh. I wasn't. I'm going to tell the clinic, I said. And your lab. And if an investigator calls, I'm going to tell them you admitted it. I'm not going to call your mother. I'm not going to post a screenshot online. I don't need any more rooms where I'm the loudest man. She nodded like she expected to hate me and couldn't. I'm sorry, she said, and I believed her. I thought I was being useful. The clinic called 2 days later to say Kara had been terminated by the lab and reported to whatever alphabet soup certifies people who are allowed to touch other people's blood. The lab sent a letter that used words like breach and falsified instrument and training re-education, which is bureaucrat for we fired her. Dr. Lee called personally to say their compliance reporting up the chain had started, that they would not be billing us for anything, and to ask if we wanted a letter of apology that said the quiet part on purpose. I said, yes, clean paper matters. There was still Derek. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to say his name out loud. Sometimes avoiding a thing is a way of letting it live rent-free in your head. I found him at Wash Park on a Saturday doing what he always did, running in a circle like it would forgive him for living in a line. He stopped when he saw me because, whatever else he is, he's not a coward. He put his hands on his hips like he was listening to a coach. Noah, he said, polite, you're fast for a guy who hates cardio. I don't hate cardio, I said. I hate men who think they deserve a medal for doing it. He smiled like I was being fun and then saw my face and let the smile die. Okay, he said, so we're doing this. You knew I didn't know, I said. It wasn't a question. I wanted to hear what kind of lie a man tells when he wants to make himself seem small. Hannah told me you checked the box, he said. She told me you were on board. She said you're a good husband who can't, you know. He raised his eyebrows in a way that made me want to change my own face. She said you were fragile. You keep using that word, I said. I don't think it means what you think it means. Do you want a lawyer present for the rest of this, or are you comfortable admitting that you signed directed donor paperwork knowing I didn't consent? He rubbed the back of his neck. Man, it seemed above board, he said. Clinic had forms. They took my sample. They paid me a stipend. It wasn't like a turkey baster in a dorm bathroom. Congratulations, I said. You upgraded your ethics along with your income. He shrugged. Look, he said, I'm not trying to be your villain. I didn't ask to co-parent. I didn't ask for holidays. I did a kindness for an old friend who wanted a baby. That kid, he's yours. Because you showed up. I'm a gene in a freezer. I stared at him and had the newcomer thought that has saved me in other rooms. The thing he just said might even be true. It didn't make any of it okay. It did make the next choices simpler. Then you'll sign a waiver, I said. You'll have your attorney waive any claim to parental rights now and forever. You'll stay out of our house and off our screens. If a court wants a cheek swab one day, you'll show up and then disappear. If you do anything else, anything, you'll meet my lawyer and my dead uncle's ghost in the same room. He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting to be told what to do by a man who loved the kid more than his own legend. Okay, he said, send the papers, I'll sign. Law comes last because feelings demand to go first. But law comes. My lawyer, who wears suits like armor and speaks like therapy, sat with me in a conference room and put all the nouns in rows. Fraud in the inducement. Breach of fiduciary duty. Intentional misrepresentation. Unjust enrichment. restitution. He circled the cost of the cycle, every invoice, every needle we paid for, and every hour I held Hannah's head over a sink, and every per my last email to HR to get a pre-authorization. We can get this back, he said. We should also ask a judge to say the out loud part, that you're on the birth certificate, you're married, you're the presumptive legal father, and it is not in the child's interest to rewrite that because someone wanted to be clever with a consent form. What happens with the trust? I asked, because money makes everything uglier when you pretend it doesn't matter. The trust is the trust, he said. Dead men get to be wrong in perpetuity if the language is iron. Your son can't be a beneficiary. You still get the land. You can plant your life on it or sell it and plant something else for him. That part's not a courtroom problem. It's a moral one, which, for what it's worth, you're better at than most people who end up in here. We filed. We didn't post. We served Hannah's inbox like adults. She cried on the kitchen floor once and then texted me, "I hate you," and then texted, "I'm sorry," and then texted a picture of Miles eating yogurt with his hands like a raccoon, as if to say, let's not ruin him over this. We did not speak for a week except about drop-off and pickup and allergies and whether he'd napped. The clinic settled before we drafted a complaint. They refunded the cycle. They wrote a letter that said, the important nouns, a directed donor consent was relied upon without appropriate second-party verification. Day, of partner consent was not obtained, internal policies were updated, staff were retrained, the physician offers apology. It arrived on heavy paper with a signature that looked like a resolve. I put it in its folder. Paper isn't love. Sometimes it's respect. Kara texted me a week after the coffee. I got fired. Then, I deserve it. Then, 2 days later in a different tone because humans aren't one thing. I hate you. I didn't reply to any of them. The lab sent a formal notice to a board with a name you only ever learn when something has gone wrong. I added that to the folder too because future me might need it. Derek's lawyer sent a waiver that looked like it had never been used before and almost enjoyed the novelty. He renounced parental rights, waived any claim to custody or decision-making, and agreed to no contact absent a future court order. He signed, notarized. A stamped sameness took the heat out of his name in my head. And then there was Hannah, which is to say, then there was everything. We tried counseling because that is what adults who don't want to be defined by one bad chapter do. The therapist asked us to write letters to each other we wouldn't send. I filled a page with sentences that started with, I felt, because she told me to use feelings, not accusations. Hannah wrote 3 pages that started with, I wanted. The therapist read them, nodded, and said, nah, do the ones that start with I chose. Hannah cried, I didn't. I don't know if that says something good or bad about me. When the divorce papers came, she signed irretrievable breakdown, like a person signing for a package she didn't order. We sat in a hallway outside a courtroom and negotiated who got the mid-century dresser and who got the dog. We share, Daisy obeys, whoever has treats. The judge granted me primary residential custody, not because blood, because mornings and nights and pediatrician forms and the teacher who knows my name and the fact that Derek's waiver makes the universe simpler and Hannah's judgment had been bad enough that the phrase best interest did not line up with her address more nights than mine. She gets weekends. She gets Wednesdays. She gets to take him to music class and watch him pound a drum like it owes him money and text me the video anyway because love doesn't stop at the county line. She does not get to move him out of state to chase a job without asking a judge with a seal on her wall and me with my calendar and a man who signed a waiver to weigh in. She lives with the choices she made. So do I. Walt's lawyer handed me keys to a house that smells like pine cleaner and old men, and the kind of quiet that makes you hear yourself too loud. The land isn't pretty in the Instagram sense. It's scrubby and honest. I walked it with Miles on my shoulders and pointed at things I remembered from being small. A cracked bird bath, A rock that looks like someone carved it to be a seat. The tree my uncle told me was a good listener. I told my son stories about a man who loved things in a way that never required an app. I set a college fund with part of the land sale anyway, even though the trust wouldn't. I put his name on it. Paper matters when it serves the person, not the other way around. My mother asked me if I'd ever tell Miles the whole truth. I said yes. Not when he's 2, not when he's 12. When he's old enough to ask and brave enough to hear, and I'm calm enough to not make my pain his homework. I will tell him that 2 people wanted him so badly they did something stupid, and that the person who showed up at 3 a.m. with a bottle is the person who gets to call himself dad. Hannah tried to spin it online once. A long post about intended family and modern love and genetic bigotry that made me want to throw my phone in a lake. She deleted it 20 minutes later, either because a friend told her the words were cruel or because a lawyer did. She is a good mother in the hours she has. She packs snacks like art. She sings off-key like all the best mothers do. She does not get to curate crisis anymore. That part of her life is over because a judge said a sentence that should be embroidered on pillows. We do not reward audacity. If you're waiting for the part where I say I'm okay, here it is. I am okay. Not every day. Not in the way that implies triumph. In the way that I drop my son at daycare and he runs back for one more hug and I breathe easier when his hand is on my neck. In the way that Daisy still insists we go outside when it's snowing because she thinks weather is a suggestion, and she is right. In the way that I cook food my uncle used to make in a pan that probably needs to be replaced and tastes better because it hasn't been. In the way that my folder labeled QUSTNs is now labeled ANSWERs, and then, smaller, enough. Here's the part I want you to take if your life ever asks it of you. Get the paper. Ask for logs, not vibes. Make boring choices in rooms where adrenaline wants to drive. Don't let shame pick your pen. And remember that you can be a good man and also be angry. You can be a good father without a lab's blessing. You can be done with a marriage without being done with your own kindness. What would you have done? Would you have buried the test and declared biology a conspiracy? Or marched into the lab and made them print the truth in ink that doesn't run? Would you have confronted the donor in a park like I did? Or sent your lawyer and kept your hands clean? Would you have kept the land and told yourself a story about blood? Or sold it and turned it into something for a kid who calls you dad because you earned it? Tell me. Drop it below. If this kept you listening, hit like so. It finds the next person staring at a portal and deciding whether to open it. Subscribe for more long, messy, true-feeling stories where the twist isn't a gotcha. It's a clause in a will, a lab friend with a favor, and a father who chose to be one before the paperwork caught up.